All right, Kobi, since we're live streaming already, I suggest I start by introducing you, but since we've kind of started our conversation, perhaps you can help me if I go wrong. And that's perhaps not unnecessary because you have a very long CV. You're a senior researcher currently at INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies in Israel. And from what I understand, prior to that, you were Deputy General at the Palestinian desk of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Is that correct?
No, I used to be.
You used to be prior to your current position.
I used to be.
Yes.
And I used to be the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and the head of the Palestinian division of the Palestinian desk.
Okay, almost got it right. And that in addition, of course, to a very long-standing academic career at universities, including Ariel University and Ben-Gvir University.
Yes, as well as Northwestern and Peking University.
In Illinois.
Yes, Northwestern Illinois and Peking, Beijing.
I see. Okay, and tonight we're going to have a discussion about the status of the Palestinian Authority. And from what I understand, you're going to talk for a large part based on an article, a recent article of yours titled "The Palestinian Authority on a Journey to Nowhere."
Yes.
That sounds like a very pressing, but also relevant and interesting topic. So I'm going to give the floor to you. And if there's anything you need, just let me know.
Okay.
Just one more thing to our viewers, I would like to remind them that those who have logged into Zoom, just 1 second, Kobi, you can write questions or remarks if you have them to me and Kobi in the Zoom application, and I will read the questions and post them to Kobi, our speaker. That was all.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want me to begin?
Yes, take it away.
The audience is already here?
Yes.
Okay, so good evening and welcome everybody. It's my pleasure and thank you for inviting me to this forum. I would like to share with you this evening some thoughts, some insights, some questions that I have with regard to the Palestinian arena, mainly talking about the Palestinian Authority. But as you probably know, today is a difficult day in Israel because we opened the day this morning with terror attack in Jerusalem, and actually this is something that we haven't experienced almost 2 decades since the hard years of the Second Intifada, and I mean the blowing buses and all the things which are similar to that. It looks as a very well orchestrated and organized operation, which means that it was executed by a terror infrastructure, by a terror organization, and I think that there is a high probability that Hamas is behind the scene, the hand that moves the cradle. But it is still under investigation. But I think that it is important to understand that what we saw this morning in Jerusalem is actually another component in a broader picture that I would like to elaborate on during our conversation. I titled it as mutual stalemate, but not hurting enough. And I would like to talk about the Palestinian Authority in the way to nowhere. I think that in order to simplify things, I will begin my presentation with the main, I would say, insights or the main conclusions that I have reached to not only in the article that I have published and the presentation is based on, but on the current analysis of the current reality, at least since the beginning of the current terror campaign that began in March 22. And I would like to talk about three vectors plus one and their implications, trying to explain the current reality, the current situation. And the third vectors that I would like to mention are, first of all, the Palestinian governance vacuum and the PA's legitimacy deficit. We see that in the last year, or even much more than the last year, there is a deterioration in the efficiency of the functionality of the Palestinian Authority, and actually talking about the northern districts of Judea and Samaria, the Palestinian Authority is almost absent. Under the physical assumption that there is no vacuum, when the Palestinian Authority is not there, somebody else would be there. And the northern districts of Judea and Samaria, of the West Bank, they became to be eventually terror greenhouses. It began in Jenin, and the major terror attacks inside the 67 border in Israel actually came from Jenin area, and later on Jenin area with its historical, I would say, heritage continued to lead the terror attacks. And later on the district of Nablus joined the district of Jenin, and the main or I would say most terror activities that we face in the last months are coming from these two districts, where the Palestinian governance is actually almost totally absent. But in addition to the absence of the Palestinian governance and the Palestinian sovereignty, we have to understand that the Palestinian Authority has almost no legitimacy among its population, among its constituency. What we see these days, which is actually a sort of an intifada, at least it is termed as intifada by the activists themselves, the Palestinian activists themselves, is not an intifada only against Israel. This is an intifada against the existing order. And the Palestinian Authority is considered as part of the existing order in the eyes of this young generation, and therefore they protest not only against Israel, but they protest and they fight against the Palestinian Authority as well, and they perceive the Palestinian Authority as corrupted, dysfunctional, and actually as an entity that does not represent them. So this is the first vector. The second vector is the terror campaign that I have mentioned that actually began on last March this year, actually fuels the ethos of armed resistance. We have to understand that this is not only a terror campaign, this is also a cognitive campaign, where the terror is a vehicle or a platform or a tool that fuel the cognitive dimension, the consciousness of armed resistance against Israel, and the daily friction between the IDF and the Israeli security services and the terrorists in Jenin and Nablus create each day, each morning and each night a new Palestinian hero. And the Palestinians who are involved in this friction with the IDF forces. They document on live all the clashes and all the fantasy of fire that they create there. And they immediately upload everything to the social media, and everything runs on the social media. And this is the reason that, as I said before, in each morning or each evening, a new Palestinian hero is born. And the idea of a very strong ethos of armed resistance against Israel is something that at the end of the day becomes, I would say, an incentive or a trigger for many youngers to take arm and to execute terror attacks against Israelis, against the IDF, and actually to join to the party. The third vector that I would like to mention is the domestic fragmentation in the Palestinian arena. This is not something new. This is something that actually has begun after the last elections in the Palestinian arena in 2006, January 2006, when Hamas took the elections. And since then, and mainly since Hamas settled down the Palestinian Authority in the Gaza Strip, and actually it was a coup d'etat when they throw out the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian security services from the Gaza Strip, we have two independent Palestinian entities which are also adversaries. The Palestinian entity in the Gaza Strip, which is ruled by Hamas, and the other Palestinian entity in the West Bank, which is ruled by the Palestinian Authority. And the Palestinian Authority is a synonym to Fatah. And there is a zero-sum game between Hamas and Fatah. All the attempts to reach reconciliation between of them actually have failed. I don't see any probability for reconciliation between both sides, because what we have to understand is that what we see in the Palestinian arena is not something which is isolated from the broader context of the Middle East. What we see in the Palestinian arena eventually is a reflection of the context in the broader Middle East. And if we want to understand the context of the broader Middle East in the last decade or so, at least since the eruption of the so-called Arab Spring, we have to understand that there is a major change in the basic geostrategic or geopolitical order of the Middle East. If till 2010 the Middle East order was based on the very fundamental brick of the Arab national territorial state, what we see because of the eruption of the Arab upheaval, okay, the Arab Spring, we see that most of the Arab republics became to be failed states in a very high degree of state failure. Actually, some of them do not exist anymore, like Libya or Yemen, and some others, like Syria or Lebanon, are in a very severe condition. And what we see in the broader Middle East is a very bloody, bitter competition, a zero-sum game competition between four, I would say, axes or four camps. And the competition is a competition for hegemony and influence and control. And we see the competition between these four axes that I will mention in a minute. We see the competition in each conflict arena in the Middle East. And we have to understand that the Palestinian arena in this regard is another conflict arena where the competition between these axes is reflected. Very shortly, the axes are the Iranian axis, which is led, of course, by Iran, the Shiite radical axis, where Iran with its allies like Syria and mainly the proxies that Iran uses all over the Middle East, where Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shiite militias in Syria, all of them are eventually Iranian proxies. And Iran uses these proxies in order to reshape the deterrence equation vis-a-vis Israel, first of all, building the capacity to deter Israel and to operate simultaneously many fronts, at least 5 fronts against Israel, and everything is done in order to prevent Israel from attacking Iran on the Iranian soil. And very patiently during the years, the Iranians built their proxies in the different arenas, and eventually they control very effectively at least 4 Arab capitals in the last decade. It's Beirut in Lebanon, Damascus in Syria, Baghdad in Iraq, and Sana'a in Yemen. Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad are Iranian proxies, although there are some differences between these 2 organizations with regard to their relations with Iran, but both of them are considered as Iranian proxies. So this is the first camp or the first axis. The second axis is the Muslim Brotherhood or the political Islam. The third axis is the Jihadiyya Salafiyya, which is represented mainly by Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Jabhat al-Nusra, and some other organizations. And the fourth camp is the pragmatic Sunni Arab camp, which is led by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and we can find in this camp all the Gulf countries, Jordan, Morocco, the Palestinian Authority, and Israel. Now, going back to the Palestinian arena, as I said before, we have to understand that what we see in the Palestinian arena is a reflection of the broader context of the Middle East. All the axes, all the camps, all the actors are represented in the Palestinian arena. They are there. Hamas is part of the political Islam of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is one camp where the Palestinian Authority is considered to be part of the Arab pragmatic camp. And due to the fact that there is a zero-sum game between the camps in the broader context of the Middle East, there is a zero-sum game even in the Palestinian arena between Hamas and Fatah. And the probability, at least according to my understanding, that these 2 actors will be able to reconcile is exactly like the probability that that President Sisi in Egypt will be able to reconcile with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. This is the same situation. But in addition to these 2 camps, we can find in the Gaza Strip, just for an example, a very teeny small place of 365 square kilometers. We can find the Iranians, we can find the Turks, we can find the Qatarians, we can find, of course, the Israelis, we can find the Palestinian Authority, and we can find some other actors as well. And each actor brings with him his agenda, and therefore what we see is not a sole Palestinian conflict, or it is not only a domestic Palestinian conflict, it is much broader conflict in the Gaza Strip, and the conflict with Hamas should be perceived and understood as such. Now, I mentioned the 3 vectors, which you can find in the upper side of the slide, and I say that there are 3 vectors plus 1. The fourth vector, the +1, is the mutual political stalemate, which means that both sides, Israel and the Palestinian Authority, are not able, maybe are not willing to make the breakthrough. In each side, it is because different reasons, but the very clear outcome is that we are facing a political stalemate. And therefore, when we have the accumulation of these four vectors, we have, I would say, 6 main outcomes. We have a weaker Palestinian Authority, we have a weaker Palestinian economy, a weaker Palestinian society, stronger Hamas, stronger Iran, and deteriorating security. And the general outcome of these 6, I would say, characteristics of the current reality is the increasing probability of armed conflict, or if you want, the third intifada. I think that we are on a very slippery slope, and we are very close to the eruption of a very violent cycle between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And I wish and I hope that I will be found wrong in this regard. So this is, I would say, the concluding insights of my presentation, and I decided or prefer to put them or to begin with them in order to make things maybe clearer. And now, with your permission, I would like to talk about the Palestinian Authority itself, to give you a sort of a very short background about the Palestinian Authority, and trying to explain what are the main reasons to the failure of the Palestinian Authority, and why I think that the Palestinian Authority goes to nowhere. So first of all, it is very important to understand that the Palestinian Authority is an outcome of the Oslo Agreement, and the Palestinian Authority is not the PLO, okay, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The PLO is the sole representative of the Palestinians, and the Oslo agreements that were signed between Israel and the Palestinians were signed between the government of Israel and the PLO. The Palestinian Authority that was established according to the agreement that were signed between Israel and the PLO was supposed to create the infrastructure for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. This is the entity that was established in order to control the daily life of the Palestinians that will be under the sovereignty of the Palestinian entity, and actually, as I said, to be the infrastructure for the coming or the future Palestinian state. And people tend to confuse between the Palestinian Authority and the PLO. Okay, the Palestinian Authority has no official responsibility for the negotiation or for the political process between Israel and the Palestinians. But life are a bit more complicated than that, and with the years, the border lines between the PLO and the PA became to be very, I would say, blurred. And we see that there are many overlaps between the PLO and the PA. And during the years, and due to the importance of the Palestinian Authority for at least the Palestinian people that live here in the Palestinian territories, the Palestinian Authority became to be, I would say, more important and more influential than the PLO. Now, talking about the Palestinian Authority, and although it is not a state entity, they, by the way, consider themselves as a state, and 142 states actually confirmed that the Palestinian there is a Palestinian state in the General Assembly, but it is not considered as a state. It is a semi-state entity, but it is a very failed semi-state entity. And the Palestinian Authority was established in May '94. It means that it is almost 3 decades that the Palestinian Authority exists. And unfortunately, it didn't succeed or failed to achieve its main 2 goals. The first one was to end the Israeli occupation, and the second was to establish the independent Palestinian state. Palestinian institutions have indeed been established during the years, and the Palestinian government, the Palestinian Authority, provides some public goods like education, health, and welfare services to the Palestinian population. But generally speaking, the level of the institutional functioning of the Palestinian Authority is very low. The Palestinian Authority is characterized, and I'm not telling you something which is very secret, okay? Is characterized by a functional failures, corruption, nepotism, and inefficiency. And as I said before, it lacks a broad public support. I mean, there is a huge deficit of legitimacy to the Palestinian Authority, and most of the Palestinian public in the West Bank do not perceive the Palestinian Authority as something that represents them. And of course, that the people of the Gaza Strip do not perceive the Palestinian Authority as something that represents them, because they are under the rule of Hamas. So there is an entity, there are institutions, but there is no legitimacy or public support, or at least broad and solid public support. And we have to understand that when we are talking about a failed state, we are talking about a relative term, okay? There are many, I would say, degrees of state failure, and not all the failed states are in the same degree of state failure. And in a sense, the Palestinian Authority is even in a better condition in comparison to some other Arab failed states. Take just for example, Yemen or Libya or even Syria. But I would say that in the criteria that the Palestinians themselves seek to find themselves, the Palestinian Authority, unfortunately, is a very failed entity with a very, I would say, low level of functionality. Here, I won't go over all the historical details. It's just all there in front of your eyes to have the general impression about all the crises that the Palestinian Authority went through. Okay, since at least the Second Intifada, which in my eyes was one of the most crucial, major, important events with regard to the Palestinian Authority. Actually, the Second Intifada ended the generation of Yasser Arafat. It was the beginning of the second generation of the Palestinian nationalism, which is represented by Abu Mazen. But I think that the Second Intifada is something that left a very deep scars in the Israeli psyche, and less than that, unfortunately, in the Palestinian psyche. And when I'm talking about the probability of the eruption of a third Intifada, I'm talking about the young generation that didn't experience the Second Intifada. And they actually do not know what are the consequences of such a clash, of such a conflict. And I hope that they will not have to experience such events. What is important to understand with regard to the events and with regard to the Palestinian arena, generally speaking, is the idea that we are talking about two Palestinian entities, as I have mentioned before, and due to the fact that there is a zero-sum game between of them and a very bitter and bloody competition, actually there is no way to reach to an agreement with the Palestinians, because if Israel will reach to an agreement, something which is very, I would say, imaginary, okay? If Israel will reach to an agreement with the Palestinian Authority, Hamas, of course, will not accept it. Hamas will reject it. If Israel will reach to any sort of understanding with Hamas in the Gaza Strip, then Israel will find itself in a very problematic situation vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority. In a sense, Israel is in a sort of a catch-22, because on the one hand, talking about the Gaza Strip, Israel has no other address but Hamas in the Gaza Strip. All the other options are much worse than Hamas and actually do not exist. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad is much more radical than Hamas, and in the very same time, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad doesn't want to rule the Gaza Strip. They just want to destroy and to demolish the state of Israel, but they do not perceive themselves as rulers, and they don't have any intention to rule the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, the Palestinian Authority is not able to rule the Gaza Strip and will not be allowed by Hamas to re-enter the Gaza Strip. So Israel is remaining only with Hamas, and the Israeli interest with regard to the Gaza Strip is to assure that Hamas will be a reliable and responsible address, in the sense that take care for the daily life of the Gazans in the Gaza Strip, but in the very same time will be restrained and will be weakened militarily. It means that on the one hand, Israel has to find a way to cooperate with Hamas and to assist Hamas to rule effectively the Gaza Strip. On the other hand, Israel has to do all the efforts in order to decrease the military capacities of Hamas. It means that on the one hand, Israel has to hug Hamas, on the other hand, Israel has to eat Hamas. And this is, I would say, a sort of very challenging situation. On the other hand, with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, the strategy that Israel has to lead is a different strategy, and there are tensions between the strategy that Israel has to operate vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority in comparison to the strategy that Israel has to operate vis-a-vis Hamas, due to the zero-sum game between these two actors and the competition between of them. And in any sort of cooperation between Israel and Hamas is a sort of recognition, okay, that Israel gives to Hamas as the sovereign power in the Gaza Strip. And once Israel recognizes Hamas in this way or another as the sovereign power in the Gaza Strip, Israel strengthens Hamas, and due to the zero-sum game between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, strengthening Hamas, meaning weakening the Palestinian Authority, and vice versa. If Israel strengthens the Palestinian Authority, is weakening Hamas, and then we might find ourselves facing some other troubles from the Gaza Strip, rockets, terror attacks, and maybe some other problems as well. So this is a sort of catch-22 that Israel has to maneuver between these two actors, between these two arenas, these two entities. And I think that most of the time Israel is succeeding in doing that. But unfortunately, I think that we are getting closer and closer to a sort of a stalemate where Israel will be forced to change its strategies, not strategy, but strategies vis-a-vis Hamas and vis-a-vis the Palestinian Authority as well. I think that it would be fair to mention that that were at least 6 years between 2007 to 2013 when we thought that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And these are the years of Salam Fayyad, who was nominated first as the Minister of Finance and then as Prime Minister. Salam Fayyad is a Palestinian, but he never lived in Palestine. He grew in the United States, and he studied in the Texas University, and he worked in the International Bank, and eventually he's very Western in his approaches, and a very good bureaucrat. And he came actually to be the Palestinian Prime Minister, and he thought that he has the responsibility to build the Palestinian state, or at least the foundations for the Palestinian state. And I think that he even has succeeded in some important projects. He dealt very seriously with the corruption of the Palestinian Authority, and he rebuilt the security apparatuses of the Palestinian Authority. But the problem was that he was too successful. The problem was that because what he did, he disconnected the oligarchy of Fatah from the government, and eventually they didn't like the idea, and Abu Mazen himself didn't like the idea, and they showed the way out to Salam Fayyad. And they went back to the old fashion and to the old manners and to the old tradition of the PLO, of the PA, which is characterized by corruption, nepotism, and dysfunctionality. And the idea that Salam Fayyad, who was a very important Palestinian builder, in a sense, you know, in Israel, many called him the Palestinian Ben-Gvir. And he was very highly appreciated by the international community. And I think that he did very important things for the Palestinian people and for the Palestinian independence and the future Palestinian state. But the idea that the old oligarchy, the old guard of the Palestinian Authority and the PLO perceived him as a threat and decided to throw him away. And the idea that these days he has a support of less than 2% of the Palestinian population, this is an indication to the very deep illness of the Palestinian society and the Palestinian politics. And this is something that we have to bear in mind. But I think that it is important to mention the era of Salam Fayyad as prime minister. I would like to almost conclude in order to give you some time to ask questions or to challenge some of my claims. But trying to understand what actually has happened and what are the root causes to the phenomenon that I have described. I think that the main problem is that the Palestinian leadership is actually almost addicted, adhered to a one-dimensional narrative. In the sense that they are not able, okay, to make the right adjustment of the Palestinian narrative or the Palestinian ethos, which is based on the idea of absolute historical justice and the idea that, or the principle that nothing is agreed upon until everything is agreed, is something that at the end of the day stuck the Palestinians, because there are many things that Israel and the Palestinians agreed upon, but the Palestinians were not willing to realize them because they insisted that everything should be agreed between both sides, and only when everything should be agreed, it will be realized. And if everything is not agreed, and if everything is not agreed based on the historical justice, which means that the establishment of the state of Israel is a historical sin, the creation of the Palestinian refugee problem is Israel's responsibility. Israel has to take the responsibility, and Israel has to, the Palestinian has to get back the historical justice or the absolute justice, and only then we can continue agreeing about the other things and realizing them. This is something that became to be a very significant barrier in the, I would say, in the political process between both sides. And we saw that in Camp David 2000 and in the Taba 2001 and in Annapolis 2007 till 2009 and 2014 Kerry, all of these trials, okay, actually became to be a huge failure when the Palestinians refused to accept any proposal or to propose a proposal of their own. All the time, they just rejected all the proposal without proposing something of their own. During the 3 decades of the Oslo process, we saw that the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian leadership continued the indoctrination of incitement. We see it in the curriculum, in the schools, and we saw that the incitement is also something which is manifested by Palestinian officials and even by Abu Mazen himself. And I think that I don't have to mention the examples. Maybe I will mention some recent example from his last visit in Germany and his accusation that Israel caused 50 Holocausts to the Palestinians, okay, in Germany, on German soil. But the incitement is there and all the time, and the incitement becomes to be indoctrination, and the indoctrination fuels the narrative, the ethos, and the sense of absolute justice, and it eventually becomes to be a very significant barriers. And paradoxically, the Palestinian Authority that was supposed to be the platform for the Palestinian state becomes to be the platform that crashed the dream of Palestinian independence. And in the article, I used 3 levels of analysis: the economic level, the societal level, the political level. I will concentrate only in one thing about the political level, explaining that I think that the main failure of the Palestinian leadership was the failure to conduct, to succeed in the transition process from a revolutionary movement to state-building leadership. They remained, Arafat of course, but Abu Mazen in his way as well, they remained stuck in the PLO revolutionary movement, and they didn't succeed, they haven't succeeded reaching the phase of state building and to introduce to their people, to their constituency, a leadership that will lead them towards a state building process. They remained in the revolution. They remained in the old conflict with Israel. Actually, I don't know if you are aware to the figures, which are just amazing figures. In another research that I did in 2012, trying to compare between the international aid that were given to Germany and Japan after World War II per capita, to compare it to the international aid that was given to the Palestinians since the beginning of the Oslo process, 1994 till 2012. And the figures are that the Palestinians got six times more per capita, than the assistance that was given per capita to Germany and Japan together after World War II. What did they do with all the money? What did they do with all the goodwill of the international community? What did they do with all the opportunities that were opened in front of them? They didn't build infrastructure. They didn't build universities. The Palestinian Authority, since its establishment, hasn't built even a single hospital in the West Bank. Okay, most of the money went to private pockets. The rest of the money, or at least very small amounts of money, went to some national projects, but they didn't devote the efforts and the resources in order to build a nation and in order to build a state. They devoted their efforts and the resources in order to continue the conflict with Israel. And I will conclude with things that have been said by Ziad Abu Ziad, a former Palestinian minister, okay, from East Jerusalem. And he says in his word in 2019, okay, we have failed to build the state from top down. The Palestinians announced the establishment of the state, waving their flag and signing their anthem and singing their anthem. However, they failed to build a state of law and address the basic problems of the citizens, including obtaining personal security and livelihood. All Arab regimes are corrupt and failing, and by implication, so is the Palestinian Authority. These are not my words. These are the words of Ziad Abu Ziad, a former Palestinian minister, but I think that these words reflect in their way my analysis, or at least my conclusions with regard to the Palestinian Authority. And I think that the Palestinian Authority faces these days the most severe crisis and challenge since its establishment in '94. And I think that the day after Abu Mazen is already here. And I'm not so optimistic that the Palestinian leadership will be able to reach to an understanding about the day after Abu Mazen, about the replacement for Abu Mazen. And I think that we have to take into consideration, and in a high probability, that the competition for the replacement of Abu Mazen will be a violent competition between some candidates that perceive themselves as suitable to replace Abu Mazen. Each one of them has a militia of his own, and due to the Palestinian tradition and the absence of ability to reach to agreement between of them, I assume that they will use their militias in order to fight each other, and this will cause a sort of deterioration that will bring both sides to a very severe crisis. And with these pessimistic insights, I would like to conclude, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you very much, Kobi. And this time to my colleague, this time I am not able to open my camera. Sorry about that. I'm gonna ask him to take care of that as possible. But in the meantime, let me thank you for this talk. It was very elaborate and it indeed gave a lot of food for thought. So let me dive in because we've gotten a couple of questions. And by the way, to our audience, please make use of the Q&A function in the Zoom application. Keep bringing questions. At the same time, I cannot guarantee that I will be able to pose all the questions in time. So it's a bit of both. I'm sorry about that. But let me dive in because I got two questions here from one of our viewers, Mr. Sebastian de Krom. His first question is, what good has handing over Gaza to the Palestinian Authority brought Israel and the Palestinians? Was this perhaps a mistake in hindsight? That's the first question. And the second, related to it, is, would the situation improve if the Gaza Strip and the West Bank were physically connected, something that has been offered in several peace plans? What do you think?
With your permission, I will begin with the second question.
Sure.
About the reconnection between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And I would say that it will be a disaster. It will be a disaster for the Palestinians, and it will be a disaster for Israel, and disaster for the entire region and its stability. As I said before, reconnection of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank means that Hamas will be with the upper hand. We have to understand that Hamas today, okay, is much stronger militarily than the Palestinian Authority and its security apparatuses. And Hamas will not let down its military wing or military capacities, okay? And if the West Bank will be reconnected to the Gaza Strip, Hamas, at the end of the day, will be able to control the West Bank as well, or at least they will try to control the West Bank. Israel will not make them such an easy life in this regard, but they will try to do it. And they will try to do it by using violence, by using force, by using terror and military capacity. And we have to remember that that Israel and the Palestinian arena are not disconnected from the region, okay? The Gaza Strip is connected to Egypt, and we have the troubles, and we know what are the troubles that Egypt faces in Sinai Peninsula with ISIS, and inside Egypt with the political Islam, with the Muslim Brotherhood. And as I mentioned, Hamas is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, okay? And if there is something that the Egyptians are really frightened from, is another, I would say, campaign or another clash with the Muslim Brotherhood. So they don't want Hamas to be too strong in this regard. And on the other side, we have Jordan, okay? And we have to remember that the majority of the population in Jordan is Palestinian majority. 70% of the Jordanian population are Palestinians. And the most radical elements in Jordan, okay, the Jordanian Muslim Brothers, are Palestinians, and these Palestinians are affiliated with Hamas. Okay, so if Hamas will be able to be more effective or more significant in the West Bank, it will influence immediately the radicals in Jordan, and this will immediately undermine stability in the Jordanian kingdom. So, and in addition to that, as I mentioned before, Hamas is an Iranian proxy as well. And as I mentioned, Iran wants to build 5 fronts against Israel. Okay, now they have Hamas in the Gaza Strip. You know what would be the consequences if they will have Hamas as proxy in the West Bank? I mean, it's a terrible headache for Israel. I think that reconnection between the two entities under the current
we've lost connection to you for a moment. I hope it is going to be re-established automatically. Apologies for that. 1 minute. Hi, Kobi. I think connection's been reestablished because I see you moving.
Sorry, I had disconnection with my internet. The audience is still with us.
It's reestablished, so all good, no worries. Okay, so I think you've answered the second question, which is, you know, what would be the consequences of a corridor between the Gaza
Yes.
Strip and the West Bank. Actually, I think parts of the first question have already been answered by your response. So let me also, for the sake of time, move on to a different question that has been posed here. Perhaps related to this one, namely, we see a lot of unrest brewing in Iran. This is also a country with a history of revolutions, or one very significant one. What would be the consequence, and of course this is hypothetical, but what would be the consequence for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict if the regime in Iran were to fall?
First of all, it will be not only with regard to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but for the entire region and the entire world, I think, for the international community as well. It will be it will be something. It will be a huge relief. Okay, but I think that if there will be a change in the Iranian regime, Hamas and mainly the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, which is much radical than Hamas, okay, much more extreme than Hamas, will not be able to exist anymore. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad almost for sure, because they are fully dependent on the Iranians. They are a full proxy of the Iranians, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Hamas is also a proxy of Iran, but it is much more independent, okay? Hamas can live even without Iran, but it will be much more difficult for him. It is not only because of the Iranian assistance to Hamas. It will be because it will be understood as a major change in the region and the entire world if the regime in Iran will be replaced or will be changed. Okay, and this will be an indication that the radicalism in any form of it, okay, is not accepted, is something that cannot be successful. And this will eventually, I think, something that will encourage the more moderate powers, the more moderate groups, even among the Palestinians, to speak louder, okay, and to pressure Hamas and to prevent Hamas from leading a radical line and deteriorating the situation. The replacement of the regime in Iran, the collapse of the current regime in Iran, is something that I even cannot describe in the right, I would say, words, in order to make you understand the importance and the significant influence that it will have on the entire region.
Okay, that's a lot for the Israeli politics and security establishment to prepare for, if things were to develop further. Anyway, here are two different questions by two audience members, and they're interrelated. So I'm going to pose them together. First one, how about actually an Israeli part of the story of what the influence of the Israeli government itself is on managing this conflict? Your article focuses on the responsibility of the Palestinians themselves, and in specific the Palestinian Authority, which leads to very important insights. But nevertheless, we're curious what are the things that Israel could change in this regard? And more specifically, here's the second question: can we expect any changes in that regard with a probable right-wing new government with even some far-right elements in it?
Yes. In the article itself, I wrote and I mentioned that Israel has responsibility as well, but the Israeli responsibility is marginal, because we saw what eventually has happened when Israeli leaders, proposed or suggested to the Palestinians some proposals that were termed as generous, not only by the Israelis, but by the Americans and by the international community. And even without mentioning Camp David 2000, where the Palestinian answer to the concessions, the Israeli concessions that were made in Camp David 2000 and in Taba January 2001 was the Second Intifada. This was the Palestinian response, to the Israeli concessions. Now, it is true that the Israeli concessions in Camp David were 92%, and the Palestinians demanded 100%. So let's continue the negotiation, But instead of continuing the negotiation, they began with the Second Intifada, when Arafat, was actually the leader of the Second Intifada. I think that the ultimate example should be the Annapolis process. In 2000, at the end of 2008, Prime Minister Olmert offered to Abu Mazen 100%, including swaps, and he offered him the division of the responsibility over the holy sites in Jerusalem, including Haram Sharif, the Temple Mount, and even agreed to absorb some Palestinian refugees. What was the Palestinian response? There was no response. Actually, it was no. What has happened in 2009 when Netanyahu came to power in the second time, and President Obama actually forced Israel to freeze the settlement. It was the first time in history since '67, that Israel freeze the building in the settlements for 10 months. What has happened? Nothing. What has happened after the initiative of King Abdullah II in 2012, when he called both sides to renegotiate, and he offered some offer for an agreement between both sides, and Prime Minister Netanyahu said yes, Abu Mazen said no. What has happened in 2014, when the special envoy of President Obama, John Kerry, came here and devoted 3 months in order to have a deal, and he proposed the deal. Israel said yes. Abu Mazen even didn't reply to President Obama. President Obama, till today, is waiting to the answer of Abu Mazen. So, and as I said before during my presentation, we have to remember the Second Intifada. What is the meaning of the Second Intifada in the eyes of the Israeli public? And We have to remember what has happened in 2015, 2016, the Intifada of the knifers, okay, the stabbing. We have to remember the terror campaign that we go through in the last 9 months. So the Israeli became to be very skeptical. Okay, and when the Israelis are looking towards the Palestinian arena, when the Israelis are looking towards the way that the Palestinian Authority actually behaves, the incitement of Abu Mazen in each General Assembly, in each September, okay, in the UN, when we see the incitement in the schools, I think that the Israeli public actually became to be much more skeptic, or in political term, more right. Okay, and what we see in the last election is the reflection of this trend. Now, I would like to remind what has happened in 21, in May 21. This was the first time since the establishment of the State of Israel that Arab citizens in the mixed cities in Israel actually rebelled, okay, against the state. They came with guns, okay, they shooted Jews and policemen, and they put synagogues in fire. This is something that has not happened since 1948. And who was behind the scene? Hamas, okay? And who actually claps hands? The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. All of these things are perceived by the Israeli public as something that threatens its security. At the end of the day, it becomes to be very skeptic with regard to any possible solution with the Palestinians. But I think that Israel could have done better in some occasions. Israel could have been more generous in some occasions, okay? But I don't think that this would have been something that would have created a major change in this regard. This is not a problem, okay? Israel, by the way, has shown twice that he is ready and willing to evacuate settlements and to withdraw from territories for peace treaties. Okay, we did it in the peace treaty with Egypt when we withdrew from Sinai Peninsula, and we did it in the Gaza Strip in 2005 in the northern part of Samaria in the West Bank. Okay, we evacuated 24 settlements. What did we get after the evacuation of Gaza? By the way, we withdrew to the Green Line, to the 67 border. I mean, there is no a single Israeli soldier on the Palestinian soil in the Gaza Strip. There is no a single settlement there or a settler, nothing at all. Everything was given back to the Palestinians. What did they do? What did they do with all the greenhouses and all the agricultural infrastructure that was left there for them? What did they do with that? What did they do with all the money that was given to the Gaza Strip after the disengagement? We got terror. We got rockets from the Gaza Strip. We didn't get flowers, or we didn't get any peace initiative, but on the contrary.
Right, the famous land for peace doctrine that has worked in the past has reached its limits. I was hoping maybe, you know, we would end on a positive note, but often the non-positive ones are equally important, if not more important. So we're much over time. And again, your talk has been very insightful, I think very important, particularly in this time. So I'm going to round up, and thank you very much for being with us, Kobi Michal. Please stay safe and keep informing us from where you are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Bye.